What it is, what is up, welcome back to my channel. It's a wrap, aka Yudi here, and we're back for another wrap up. There are so many videos that I owe you all. Let's not even get into it. And spring is finally here for real. Like, this is the first time I'm recording this. I don't know if it's a record high, but it's like 80 degrees outside. And I was just like, yay, let me go outside. And baby, the way the allergies were hitting, I just could not stop sneezing. And I swear, the older I get, the worse my allergies get. They did not used to be this bad, but like I'm sneezing, congested. I just need to take some allergen. But anyway, y'all don't care about that. Y'all care about what I read for the month of March. So let's get right into it. So I'm going to say I read 5 books this month. One of them I have not finished yet, but this month is also not over when I'm recording this. And I know I'm going to finish it by the time the 1st of April comes. So I'm going to have to grab some water. I'm congested so bad, y'all. Like, I need water. Give me a second. Yeah, I need a water bag. So yeah, I've read 5 books this month. 1 audiobook. 1 ebook, 3 physicals. So let's get right into it. Let's start off with the audiobook. I listened to Jojo's Over the Influence, which was also perfect timing that I read this month because I also saw her in concert. I'll link a little clip of her singing one of her hits. But yeah, I went and I saw her this month and I listened to her audiobook. It started off really strong. I owe you all, I want to do like a ranking of all the memoirs that I've read. And specifically, I read the musical memoirs of mainly like the R&B and hip hop artists. So I really want to do like a ranking of all the ones that I've read. This is on the better side of some that I've read. It's pretty average. Jojo has a very interesting story in that she got signed on her record deal when she was very young. She was signed to Blackground, which is also Aaliyah's uncle's label, and Aaliyah, I believe, was signed. If you know anything about Blackground, it's Jojo was on there, some of Aaliyah, some of Tony's albums are on there, Tank. I'm trying to think of some other artists. But yeah, but there was a while that a lot of like those artists, some of their albums, some of the ones that I think are beloved, were not available on streaming because I don't know what's going on with Blackground, but they just hadn't signed with streaming deals yet. So there was that. And then also for a long time, Jojo didn't come out with the album because she was trying to get out of that deal, and pretty much that label owned her voice. So for a while, she wasn't coming out with music because she was just in a really bad contract that she signed when she was a child. So it was very interesting to read about her navigating through the industry and also her own personal journey. If you like Jojo, you will learn some new things about her, I think. It kind of gets repetitive at some point. I think there's some things that you probably could have left out, but if anything, it read pretty cathartic, like to finally just write it all out, what she's been through, and just get it onto a page. I really love Jojo's music. I think also as she's gotten older, like her music is very vulnerable and is very relatable. Yeah, I had an okay time with the book. Again, I just found at some point, especially towards the middle more towards the end, when she's kind of stuck in that, like, she thinks that the next song is gonna be the next big thing that's gonna, you know, put her back in like the Leave Get Out moment of her career, and it always seems to like flub and fail. Started to get a little repetitive. And some of these singles, like she talks about when Other Chick comes out, which is a single that she had, I think in like the late 2000s, early 2010s. And I think if you're not a JoJo fan, I'm not sure how much you would remember that song. Like some songs, like I feel like some of these songs you would appreciate if you were actually you follow JoJo throughout the time of her like figuring out her deal, which is like, yeah, like the late 2000s through like the 2010s. I think that's the time that like those songs, unless you were a deep JoJo fan, you probably wouldn't remember, unless she like her covers, like Marvin's Room. What's another big cover she had? I feel like if you're not a JoJo fan, you probably wouldn't remember some of these records. I feel like most people will be the most tuned in at the beginning with her first 2 albums, because those were like her biggest mainstream successes. And I think everything after that, you're probably, if you're not a deep JoJo fan, I don't know how much you would appreciate it. But still, overall the story is still a good story. Let me move on to This Kind of Trouble. It was an ebook by Tochi Eze. I read as an arc, and man, this is one of the books that I was anticipating to come out this year. It doesn't come out until August, but this is the story of Margaret and Benjamin. October 1960 is when Nigeria gets their independence. So they meet like literally at the beginning of Nigerians' independence, and they fall in love. And when they decide to marry each other, they learn that they can't be together because of some things that happened like generations before them that ultimately cursed both lines of their family. Mainly cursed Margaret's line if she decides to have a child, and if she decides to stay with Benjamin. So they pretty much don't listen. They end up having a child, and somehow, like in the midst of not listening and having a child, they break up and they don't see each other again. But then we get into it's the early 2000s, and their child has reached back out to Benjamin, and now they have this connection. The story goes back and tells the story of why they ultimately did not work, and what is this family curse. You know what? Honestly, at first I wrote, or did I say this in a video? I think I said this is my last wrap up when I was currently reading it, that kind of reminded me of Homegoing. And I think that's a lie. It reminds me more of Rootless. I think that multi-generational story, like way of telling the story, reminded me of Homegoing, but it more reminds me so of Rootless. I mean, both stories. I think Rootless, again, Rootless, this ending left me like, we went through all this for it to end up like this. I love a good intergenerational family story. There is some like misinformation going on in terms of the way that the community plays into like this misinformation of what exactly happened to their ancestors and how that carries from generation to generation. And maybe it could have been resolved if they actually communicated with one another and they gave like their family some grace. They carry it through generation to generation, and as it goes through generation to generation, we lose more and more of what exactly happened that they're still carrying, that are still like disturbing and disrupting their lives. And if only they knew the truth, like it probably would have set them free. Get the book when it drops, because I feel like there's so much to discuss within the book. I did not really care for Benjamin's character. I didn't care for Benjamin's character. I don't know if he really grew as a character, but it seemed like he really did love Margaret. I don't know if he just really had the tools to show up for Margaret the way that she needs to be shown up for. And there was so much that Margaret was holding on to that I wish that she was able to let go of, so she could really enjoy and live her life. This would just be a really good book club read, because there's so many different themes to talk about that I just can't even articulate in my short little wrap up without being like 40 minutes, 30 minutes long. I probably should do its own dedicated. Once this book releases, I'm probably going to do its own personal dedicated review really going in depth through all the different topics. I just feel like it's a little bit too soon right now. But just know that I really enjoy this read, and I already pre-ordered it. Thank the Lord. My sister gave me a Barnes & Noble's book card. This is definitely one of the top reads that I read this year, and that might be a controversial opinion, but I just really enjoyed it. It's a story that stuck with me. Okay, now those were like the books that I didn't have physically. Let's get into my physical books. The first one I have is Parable of the Talents by Octavia Butler. This one I read for my book club that I'm a part of. If you are in Baltimore, again, I will have it linked in the description below. We meet in Fells Point. Yeah, so I have it linked down below. We meet at the end of every month. And next month for April, we are reading Julia Alvarez, How the Garcia Girls Lost Their Accent. And the book club is banned books, so we have primarily been reading banned books. We decided this month we read Parable of the Talents. The month before we read Parable of the Sower, so we could complete the Earthseed series. And I will say that I enjoyed Parable of the Talents more than I enjoyed Parable of the Sower, and I think the book club would agree, because we had a really good discussion off of Parable of the Talents. It goes into Earthseed, which is the religion, the group that Lauren Olamide character creates. And I don't want to give away the book too much because a lot of stuff happens, but the story is written that Olamina's daughter, Larkin, she is reading her mother's letters, and like some other characters, but mainly her mother's letters, trying to understand her mother. And you kind of get her mother's perspective, you know, as she's going through her life. And then we get the perspective of her daughter looking back and I guess reevaluating her perception of her mother. This is a classic. So as of now, I've read the Earthseed series from Octavia Butler, and I've also read Kindred. So yeah, I'm slowly getting through Octavia Butler's catalog. I know she has a whole bunch of other books. I know she also has like Wild Seed. Maybe I'll read that one next. But I'm glad that I started off with Kindred, because I think, one, this is one book that I think is made to be read in community. But yeah, of course, I'm not, 5 out of 5, read it. It's a classic. Okay. The next book I read, this is the reason why I'm making this video now, because this book is actually due on April the 1st. So I have to get this back to the library. But this is Come and Get It by Kiley Reid. I had this on my anticipated reads of 2024, but when the book started to come out, it had such mixed reviews that I was very hesitant on buying it, and also just hesitant on reading it, period. And I saw it in the library and I was like, let me read it, because I loved Such a Fun Age. The microaggressions of Black people in white spaces, it's so nuanced in like the most enjoyable way. But anyway, Come and Get It is kind of similar. It's set in a university. So Agatha is a writer, and she goes to Arkansas to be a visiting professor, and then also she's working on this book about weddings. And while she's doing her research for her book about weddings, she meets Millie, who's an RA at the university. And not only does she meet Millie, the RA, she also meets some of her residents who live in that building as well, which is Jenna, Cassie, and Tyler. And Tyler, this is me going through all the characters. Tyler lives in a flat or in a dorm room with Kennedy and Peyton, which is next to Millie's dorm. So pretty much she does this, the impetus of the story is that she does research at the university, and she meets Tyler, Cassie, and Jenna, and they're just so like interesting to her when they start talking about weddings and their financial relationships to weddings, that she's just all like, scratch this book, I want to write about these 3 girls. So she ends up like getting in touch with Millie and just like listening to these three girls and their conversations in the dorm, which probably is, yeah, there's just a lot of funky stuff that happens while she's trying to get information on these girls to potentially write a story. And pretty much there's not much that happens in this book. It's definitely giving like a slice of life, and I can see why it had such not as great of a reception as Such a Fun Age, which feels more of like a more structured story than Come and Get It is. But Come and Get It does have, like, it wasn't a boring read, right? Like, there is some interesting moments and scenarios that happen within the book. There's interesting dynamics. Agatha's story and her relationships are interesting. There is one part in the book that pretty much pushes and drives the end, but doesn't really, I guess, connect to the whole entire story. Like, there is no big challenge and then solution. Like, it's not as tight as Such a Fun Age was. It still wasn't a terrible read. Like, I would still give it a 3. I agree that it's not as strong of a sophomore novel as her debut novel is. I think Kiley Reid always does a good job in terms of like race and the nuanced relationship between Black and white people in the United States. She does so good at like those cringy microaggressions that, like, I think it's hard. Actually think it's hard to communicate and write down. I think a lot of the times when you read it in books, it's very like on the nose. They're so like nuanced in a way, like it's so recognizable. And the way that she writes the white characters are like, it's that left to white, but still, like, they're not overtly racist, but you know, heavy on the microaggressions, heavy on the anti-blackness of it all. Like, I can't even put it to words. So for her to be able to communicate that in a book it's always great. I'm probably still going to read her next book. Hopefully her next book is a little bit more, the story is a little bit more strong, but I don't think it's like, it is kind of a disappointing sophomore novel, but it's not like the worst novel I've ever read. You feel what I'm saying? Like, the thing that she did well in her last book, she still did well in this book. I just don't think the storyline.
Much later.
I'm just gonna put it in the mid-Atlantic. Like, all my Baltimore, my Philly people, y'all know when it starts to get warm outside, the dirt bikes are out. Oh, this is where we are. But overall, I'm giving Come and Get It a 3. A 3. It's not like a terrible read. I wouldn't highly recommend it, to be honest, but it wasn't the end of my world. Y'all, I can't breathe. I can't breathe. My allergies are kicking my ass. The last book I have not finished yet, but I know I'm gonna finish it before the end of the month. There's still a couple of days before the month ends. I just need to record it now because when I get into the office, I need to take that book back. So this is Bling by Erica Kennedy. For context, Erica Kennedy at one point was a publicist for, I think, like Tommy Hilfiger and other like fashion brands, and she also wrote for a bunch of publications and journals in New York City. So she was a journalist, publicist, just an overall media communications girly, darling, okay? Doing big things. And she was also friends with Kimora Lee Simmons, and she was her maid of honor at her first marriage to Russell Simmons. So very heavily involved in like the New York celebrity scene and circuit. First of all, before I give the context of 2004, what is Bling about? Bling is multi-perspectives, but it's mainly about this artist. Her name is Mimi. I think she's from, it's Toledo in Ohio. I think she's from Ohio. She's from, I believe, Ohio. And she auditions for this label, Triple Large, which is run by Lamont, who was like a Russell Simmons, Diddy, Jay-Z figure of his label. And she's auditioning to be part of this label with her group. And Lamont, who heads the label, is all like, I want Mimi, I don't want the rest of the group. So the book pretty much goes through Mimi becoming this star. But also, as it's telling the story of Mimi becoming the star, it's also talking about the various other characters in this label. Lamont, who's the head of the label. There's Daryl, who is like the producer and also just the henchman of the label, who does all like the random ish that Lamont wants. And it pretty much, yeah, talks about the various relationships of the people on the label. Some of the other artists, some of like Lamont's girlfriend, his mother, brother, and his brother's married to like this supermodel who's losing her, like her supermodel, like she's getting older. And her name is Vanessa. And also it touches on like colorism, because Mimi's a light-skinned biracial, and being a woman in the industry. But it's such a weird, I'm almost done with it. It's such a weird read. One, again, it's 2004, so a lot of 2004 references. You know, if you remember 2004, Diddy was really in our faces in the early 2000s, like very much in our faces. He was telling us to maybe that's 2002, 2003, but he was telling us to pass the Cavassier. Nobody even drinks Cavassier anymore. Okay, the rapper mogul was like, it was peak 2000s, which they named the gamut of them. You know, the Jay-Z's, it's Rock Nation, it's the Bad Boy with Diddy. Russell, at this point, he's not associated with Def Jam, I think, but he has his clothing line. That's Fat Farm, right? He has Fat Farm. The clothing lines, it's Fat Farm, it's Sean John, it's Akaware. I mean, hip hop is just like a big industry. It's a big industry. It emulates all that through this label, Triple R, and through the character Lamont. Even though she also mentions all these various characters and artists, there's some weird scenes, there's some weird relationships. The relationship between Mimi and Lamont and the power dynamics and the way that he infantilizes her and controls her. And yeah, I mean, there's so many. I'm sure there's multiple relationships, but it's mainly making me think of Diddy and Cassie, because Cassie's very young when she signs. I mean, she's pretty much the same age, actually, as Mimi when she signs with Bad Boy and ends up in this relationship with Diddy. And I mean, 04. In 04, I don't think she's in a relationship with Diddy at this point. But I'm sure that there's multiple other moguls that probably, like, Diddy's not probably the first or the last to do some ish like this. So the fact that, like, we go through this dynamic between Mimi and Lamont in the book, and she's just so naive, and also a part of her is kind of letting him take this fatherly role because she doesn't have, like, this guiding figure in her life. Like, she doesn't have this parental figure that's like going to financially, like in terms of like advice, like be that like, you should do this, or maybe this is the best thing to do in her life. And she kind of amalgamates, is that a word? But she kind of puts that all together. Like, he is not only is this someone I can love, but this is someone that can show up for me as a parental figure. This is the person that's going to be able to also, you know, be the figure that like pushes me to my dreams. And it's too much. She's too much to Mimi. He's too much to Mimi in a way that's very dangerous. We already know, ultimately, I haven't got to the end, but we can only tell that this probably falls apart by the end. Daryl's character, Daryl is a producer that like does all this work for other artists, but he doesn't seem to ever get the credit. Like, there's a lot of misogyny happening in the book. It's such an interesting thing to read, as now that everything seems to be coming to the light about like the things that happen in the industry, and Erica seems to write it in this like crazy fictionalized way. But as more things come out, we learn that, oh, this actually happened to some people, and like processing that in this book, that like she's writing about it. But like, this could be a Diddy, this could be a Russell, this could be a Jay-Z, Mimi could be Alicia Keys. it makes for an interesting read. I think this is just it's interesting to read this now, knowing the climate that the industry is in, and probably people, I don't know how, I'm gonna have to go back and read reviews from when this book came out on like Goodreads to see what people think, because I wonder if it has changed now that we're reading it and we know, and a lot of these big characters that people admired have now fallen from grace, and they're criticized more than they're loved. And that completes everything that I read in March. Let me know what you all read, and let me know if you've read the books that I'm talking about, and if you have any more thoughts to add. Until the next time, y'all, deuces.